So as journalists and researchers, I want to be as scientific and real as possible. However, being a trained psychic and being found from 15 forward in NASA and government and Department of Navy, I worked for the Department of Navy, DOD, DON, and then when I went to Washington, the CIA asked to buy my contract. The psychiatrist asked me that. And then after that, meeting people that used ESP and didn't have to talk with their mouth. I'm very conflicted because I worked with Men in Black from the 80s forward, as far as I know. And Greys, we weren't allowed to talk about them, period. I couldn't admit or deny anything about them. However, I went on record, Janet, with seeing them with the government in 86. J. Allen Hynek died, but they had me meet or someone. This is what I need to get into the scientific and the phenomenology. Cosmology is the fact that now that I'm going to come forward with, before I die, there's various levels of existence in one experiencer's life that includes this whole gambit of understanding. J. Allen Hynek was in charge of CUFOs, Steve, CUFO, Center for UFO Studies. Are you familiar with CUFOs, Steve?
Not so much.
All right. Well, he worked with Project Blue Book.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
So some people may not know. All right, J. Allen Hynek I met in person, and this was along when we had, what's the other one, Janet? Dr. Bruce Maccabee worked for with the government. We had him start this.
I don't know the name.
All right, well, there's a bunch of them back in the day.
I don't care.
All right.
Who cares?
Well, back in the day.
NICAP was one of them. Was that the one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
A bunch of them.
All right. So the government's always been involved. It's just when the money would run out and we'd let other people take over contractors or start nonprofits or whatever. So we started a bunch of nonprofits. So yes, the government has always been involved one way or another. So we have got to, with the UFO Association and the ACO Association, Health and Wellness, we've got to get above the separation of red, white, and blue, black, pink, whatever colors. But remember when we go back to the DNA and the history and the Allied Command, I was told that the 23 in the chromosomes, the DNA, remember we said, and I've heard we'll just say John Lear, say 87, and then I've heard 67 levels are various aliens. So I'd like Alienology to consider any information, including that Art Greenfield has in his UFO file or John Lear has in his, no matter, we'll keep people by their state or whatever, I don't know, but we got to figure out how to run this in a very short period of time in 2019 because it's only going to get thicker and more involved. And now that Bob Lazar on record with his producer. Have y'all seen that? He came out. They made a documentary for Bob Lazar, and I'm on that team. And that because now let me tell you, Janet, Allied Command is supporting me and Bob Lazar because my husband and I were told about the numbers on the table before Bob was, and he knew about people in other divisions besides Bob Lazar, where I was learning about how we communicated with our minds with the Greys, to answer Janet. Tom was working on the weapon systems. Remember how they had pieces?
Right. Yeah.
But we also knew they had the full craft. So this is why Janet wants to help me, or me and her write a book with what she knows to put the chapters in, and why we met, because it's very ET or alien or both guided. So the ET, a lot of people, Janet, want to say extraterrestrials are benevolent. And I even said that back in 87 and then back again in 97 and 2007 with Stanton T. Friedman when we were working on the MJ-12 manuals, right, with Dr. Robert Wood. But I only talked to Robert's son. I didn't talk to William Tompkins or Robert Wood, but you did. You talked to William Tompkins. Remember?
I talked to both Bob Wood and Bill Tompkins and their wives at the MUFON conference, not this past year, but in 2017. And
well, this is
I was
another
supposed
level.
to meet with Bill Tompkins.
Yeah, you called me.
And then
you were in meetings. You called me. Do you remember? I was in the Human Genome Project with my daughter. Remember, we were working with the Nordics in the medical field. Okay.
So Monday
That's
before
real,
I was
folks.
going to catch my plane, I was supposed to meet with him, but then Bob Whitcomb said, I'm going to take Bill because we're working on his book, so I'm sorry, but I'll make sure he gets back with you. And he never got back with me because Bill wanted to get my piece of the information, because every time he looked at me, see, Bill's very telepathic, and he's looking at me, he's going, what is that, and I go, well, I'm telepathic like you are. Let's explore this, because that gets activated in some of the contactees experiencers. And he wanted to tell me something about, he said that you can take any problem and you storyboard it, and it's a 10-foot, no, it's a foot
he
by
had
40
one.
feet
He had
long.
a 6 by.
He said we do this with everything. They have them.
Yeah, we
storyboard
it.
Over. They storyboard it. He said we have that all over. We did every.
Yes.
And we're talking about every problem we had faster than a computer. It's a human thing, and it's what we do. We storyboard, and when you see it laid out and 40 feet long, and that's why the old papyrus are rolled up in scrolls. Because it's a storyboard, and it solves, and it's like an abacus. It's like primitive, but it's so efficient. It's so more efficient than computers, and it uses the human mind and our intellect and our ESP. And he kept saying, you have to understand. That's how we solve problems. We need to go back to doing that. That's how we'll resolve all the issues that fight humanity. But Bob wanted to tell me about the reptilians. He said, I've got to tell you about the reptilians, what's really going on.
And I would never deal with that. I won't deal with it. Those were the ones that Tom and I were told we didn't like them. They were always jacking with us in space, remember? And we separated the Greys because they were the ones that destroyed the Greys, the original Grey family. They destroyed the planet like Maldek. They blew the crap out of it. So this was important. And that's where, Tom and I, but Bill, I met him, and they had me meet him at a hangar. And I remembered they were storyboarding with him and me, and I met him in Dayton, Ohio, because the government had me drive there. And then I met him again at a hangar when Qualcomm, I said, remember Qualcomm, because I knew they were going to block me. When they'd take me to the CIA, like they'd do sodium pentothal, right? I got onto the nurse because they were putting in me, I was like, no way, because, I did that. I was trained, as a phlebotomist. Is that what it's called anymore? I don't even remember. Okay. So when I was going in for a CIA briefing, or one of the polygraphs, they put that in me, and it made me cry, and my nose run, and people were saying, God, they're taking her over the grill. But what it was is they wanted me to work with the Pentagon, right? When my girlfriend, that she and I roomed together, she went to the Pentagon, and I went to the Department of Navy, but they bought my contract in intelligence. But it was NSA, National Security Agency, that was always meeting with me. But when I went to Chicago and I met J. Allen Hynek, then I met, went up and did in crypto rooms between the FBI and the CIA were sharing rooms. Of course, the NSA busted that all up, or the government. I don't know. They always were fighting over money, all the groups I worked with. So that's a part of it, too. But now this is just history, folks. To me, it's no big deal because I lived through it. But the part that I think is important to Steve and you and me is the fact that we have been working with MUFON are in ways that we didn't know, but I only got involved after J. Allen Hynek and the U.S. Navy, and then William Tompkins, so I could prove I met him and that he was storyboarding and all the levels, and they were, I don't know how, when you met Bill, because you guys went to UFO conferences. Steve, did you meet William Tompkins right before he died at the UFO? Was he an international UFO or contact in the desert?
No. MUFON.
I never met him.
It was a MUFON. Yeah.
Okay, Janet, let's get this on record. Janet, where did you meet him? It was one of those UFO conferences.
It was the Las Vegas MUFON conference, and I haven't been to a MUFON. It was the first MUFON conference I went to.
I asked you to go to that. You weren't even going to go.
I heard about that. I heard about that. No, let me go back. I was at Contact in the Desert, and I ended up talking to a woman who was somebody she knew was working on Bill Tompkins' book, and so she said he's going to be at the MUFON conference. So I booked it because I wanted to go there and work with Tompkins. And I had just received Selected by Extraterrestrials, and I was going, oh, this is it. This is really it. We have to go over this. So anyway, that's why I booked it. I told Sasha, I said, I don't care. We're just going to go. And he follows my lead. He says, okay, we'll go. So we did. And then but this is going back to what we said earlier. Things are orchestrated. And
I remember you weren't one to go.
Because you met Hynek, I met Hynek. When I was I turned 21 at the Star Trek conference, and I went to 2 in a row in New York City when I was 21, and there was J.I. Allen Hynek there. So I met Hynek a lot. And then I would go to the ball, and they'd be, informal, you go up and talk to him. So I've had some personal conversations with him. I was very young, and I was stupid, but, at least I had. So everything is directed and orchestrated. So we get to meet these people and go to do these things. But I'm trying to piece into this puzzle here is what is Steve's role? So I don't want to leave him out of the conversation, and we have about 15 minutes left.
Archivist,
Steve,
historian, and chemist.
What we just talked about? Yeah, what would you like to say about what we just discussed? And thank you for being our witness. Steve, back to you.
Well, like I said, I just never have trusted MUFON because I've just seen evidence that they have an agenda against any kind of good physical evidence coming to light. And Dr. Lear, who I trusted implicitly, told me that they were taking Air Force money to grab any physical evidence from people that had it in the public, and telling people that it was just ordinary earthly stuff while they sent it into the Air Force to be analyzed. The true results had never seen the light of day.
Well, my problem was I was a former investigator, trained in uniform, out of uniform, legal investigator for rich attorneys out of Houston, Percy Foreman, Benton Musselwhite, John O'Quinn, but mainly Newton B. Schwartz, because Newton I met back in the day when Percy Foreman, I know that I met him in we argue over it, but I know when I was running Jandor Gardens, and so when he interviewed me for a job, I had worked for Dr. Grady Hallman, heart surgeon, and Dr. John Hill, plastic surgeon, and they wrote for Blood or Money about Joan Robinson Hill and me riding horses and going to the Shamrock Hilton, and he said he doesn't remember a lot, but he said, I remember you talking about Grady Hallman and John Hill because I hired you to work for me. And that's when I was running at NASA, working for Newton B. Schwartz, attorney at law, and he had in property investments. But what was so funny is I took on from Jandor Gardens for Dr. John Hill and Grady Hallman's investment by the Warwick, where I got my tooth busted at 15 and met these Arabic, the people. Janet, I thought about this. My aunt worked for the government and met the Shah of Iran, and I saw the pictures at her house in Monroe, Louisiana. And her husband was one of the ones that worked for the government, but her sister's husband worked for the government. So I'm not sure how this goes. Even though my mother didn't believe in UFOs and didn't work for the government, she worked for Geospace Engineering, and she worked for Olin Matheson, which was a paper company, as her brother did, that became a millionaire on doing Winchester cartridge stuff and owning million. Each machine was $1 million in Memphis, and then I did the Mid-South Con there. So I'm not sure if I'm the second generation or not, even though my mother wasn't. This is stuff we've got to look into, because my aunts, my mother's sisters worked, because I saw pictures of her in Florida with the Shah of Iran. And that was back when we were trying to Americanize and help Iran, and really going to help the world.